What if the ancient world held secrets about reality so shocking they were deliberately hidden from us? Imagine stumbling upon a long-lost text, one so controversial it was buried for centuries, its pages whispering that the gods, spirits, and mythical beings of legend weren't divine or supernatural at all, but something far more unsettling. They were holograms. Think about that for a second. The entities worshipped, feared, and immortalized in sacred stories across civilizations. Could they have been advanced projections, illusions woven into the fabric of human history? This isn't science fiction, hidden in the shadows of forgotten libraries and sealed away in vaults. There's a forbidden book making this very claim, and today we're pulling back the veil. Picture this, a dusty manuscript, its brittle pages etched with symbols that defy translation, discovered in the ruins of a temple no one was meant to enter. The scribes who penned it warned of catastrophic consequences if its truths were ever revealed. Why? Because this book doesn't just challenge our understanding of mythology, it shatters it. It suggests that ancient cultures didn't merely interpret bizarre phenomena as divine. They may have interacted with beings who weren't gods or spirits, but sophisticated holographic constructs. Entities that appeared, spoke, even performed miracles, yet were nothing more than light and sound, woven into reality by technology we can scarcely comprehend. Could this explain the uncanny similarities between myths worldwide? The so-called gods descending in luminous chariots, vanishing into thin air, or appearing in flashes of celestial fire. Now consider the implications. If these entities were holograms, who or what created them? Were they messages from an advanced civilization lost to time? Experiments by an ancient precursor race, or something even more unfathomable? The eerie parallels between these accounts and modern holographic technology are impossible to ignore. From the oracle at Delphi, said to channel voices from nowhere, to the biblical burning bush that spoke without a source, the pieces fit a pattern too precise to dismiss. This forbidden book doesn't just rewrite history, it forces us to question everything we've been taught about the boundaries of our world. And the most chilling question of all, if holograms walked among us once, could they still be here, hidden in plain sight? Stick around, because what you're about to discover will change how you see the past and the unseen forces shaping our reality even now. The story of how this forbidden book resurfaced reads like something straight out of an adventure novel, except the stakes were terrifyingly real. It was the summer of 1987 when a team of archaeologists digging near the ruins of a Mesopotamian temple uncovered a sealed chamber buried beneath layers of volcanic ash. Inside, wrapped in a decaying cloth that disintegrated at the touch, was a series of metal plates, not parchment or clay, but an alloy modern scientists still can't fully identify. The engravings on them weren't cuneiform or any known ancient script. Instead, they were a labyrinth of geometric patterns, pulsing with an eerie luminescence under ultraviolet light. The local workers refused to touch them, whispering about curses. Even the lead researcher, a hardened skeptic, later admitted feeling a wave of dizziness every time he tried to translate them. But here's where it gets stranger. The plates weren't just hidden, they were deliberately trapped. The chamber's walls were lined with inscriptions warning of false gods made of light and voices without throats. One phrase repeated like a mantra: "To read is to awaken the watchers." And then there was the book itself. Unlike anything in the archaeological record, its pages were thin sheets of a glass-like material, flexible yet unbreakable, etched with symbols that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. Infrared scans later revealed layers of text beneath the surface, as if the book was designed to hide its true contents from casual observers. Why was it forbidden? Because every culture that encountered it met the same fate. The team tracked references to similar artifacts across history, a shimmering codex mentioned in suppressed Egyptian priestly records, a mirror that speaks, described in Mayan prophecies as the reason for a royal purge. In every case, rulers or religious authorities ordered it destroyed, not out of superstition, but because whoever interacted with it began reporting the same phenomenon: phantom figures appearing in their periphery, whispering in languages no one understood. Some scholars even claimed the book wasn't just documenting holograms, it was somehow generating them. A fragment recovered from a medieval monastery included a chilling marginal note: "The light remembers." Now here's the detail that chills me the most. When scientists finally managed to stabilize one of the plates for analysis, they detected microscopic structures resembling quantum dots, nanoparticles used in today's holographic displays. Yet this book was sealed away thousands of years before such technology existed. So who or what engineered it, and more importantly, why would they leave it for us to find? Who crafted this enigmatic book, and what kind of mind would dare to record such explosive truths? Theories about its origins sprawl across possibilities as vast as they are unsettling. Some scholars argue it was the work of a renegade priest, someone who stumbled upon the illusion at the heart of ancient worship and paid the ultimate price for exposing it. In ancient Sumer, for example, there are fragmented accounts of a temple scribe named Enlil-Mansum, who was allegedly executed for inscribing blasphemies about the gods being shadows without flesh. Could he have been part of a lineage of truth-tellers passing down this dangerous knowledge in secret? Then there's the more radical idea that the book wasn't authored by humans at all. The advanced materials, the shifting symbols, the nanoscale structures embedded in its pages, none of these align with any known ancient technology. This has led some researchers to propose it was left behind by a pre-flood civilization, one far more sophisticated than our history books acknowledge. The infamous Oer Linda book, a controversial Frisian manuscript, describes a lost civilization with light that could think and mirrors that conjured ancestors. Could these be garbled references to the same technology? Even more chilling is the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Ancient astronaut theorists point to the book's descriptions of sky-born architects who supposedly engineered these holographic entities as part of an experiment. The Dogon tribe of Mali, for instance, speaks of celestial beings called the Namo who descended in a vessel of light and shared forbidden knowledge. Strikingly, their oral traditions describe these beings as existing in many places at once, a perfect metaphor for holograms. But perhaps the most compelling clue lies in the cultural backdrop of its hiding places. The book's fragments appear in ruins tied to abrupt collapses. The fall of Akkad, the disappearance of the Maya's elite class, the sudden silencing of the Delphic oracle. It's as if wherever this knowledge surfaced, catastrophe followed. Was it suppressed because it revealed too much, or was there something actively hunting those who uncovered it? The book's warnings about awakening the Watchers take on a new, ominous weight when you realize every civilization that touched it was wiped from history shortly after. One detail binds these theories together. The book's creators, whoever they were, understood humanity's psyche deeply enough to tailor these holograms to our deepest fears and aspirations. The gods demanded worship, the spirits offered guidance, the miracles inspired awe. This wasn't random, it was precision engineering. So the real question isn't just who wrote it, but what were they trying to achieve? A test, a warning, or a trap left dormant for millennia, waiting for the right moment to reactivate. The Forbidden Book's central claim is as bold as it is unsettling. The entities humanity has worshipped, feared, and mythologized across millennia weren't supernatural beings at all. They were meticulously crafted holograms. Not metaphors or symbolic representations, but actual projections, designed with a sophistication that blurs the line between technology and magic. The text describes these holograms as light-given will, capable of speech, movement, even interaction with the physical world, yet utterly intangible. They mimicked divine power flawlessly, flames that didn't burn, voices that echoed from empty air, apparitions that could materialize before crowds, then vanish without a trace. But here's the detail that chills me most. The book insists these projections weren't random. They were tailored. Every culture's gods, angels, or spirits matched the expectations and fears of the people witnessing them. In Mesopotamia, towering figures emerged from ziggurats wielding rods of lightning. In Greece, luminous beings descended from the clouds, draped in robes that shimmered like constellations. The patterns were too precise to be coincidence. The book calls this the shaping, a deliberate calibration of holograms to reflect whatever a society believed the divine should look like. Even more startling are the accounts of how these entities behaved. They didn't just appear, they performed. The book recounts miracles with eerie parallels to modern holographic stagecraft visions in the sky, like the biblical pillar of fire guiding the Israelites, described as a seam torn in the air through which light poured. Oracles who spoke in trances, the text suggests they were interfacing with hidden emitters, their minds flooded with voices only they could hear, and those who touched these beings often reported their hands passing through them, meeting no resistance, just a static-like tingling. The book's term for this, the lie of solidity. Purpose is where the theory becomes truly unnerving. The book claims these projections weren't mere spectacles, they were tools of influence. Some served as instructors, delivering advanced knowledge in agriculture, astronomy, or architecture to select individuals. Others wielded fear, enforcing moral codes with threats of divine wrath. But the most controversial assertion, that certain holograms were designed to manipulate history itself. The book describes turning points where these entities appeared at critical moments, guiding battles, legitimizing rulers, even sparking religious movements, always nudging civilization toward an unseen goal. Perhaps the most haunting passage details a failed projection. In one account, a hologram meant to appear as a benevolent sky god glitched during an audience with an Egyptian pharaoh. Witnesses described its form flickering, its voice fragmenting into mechanical stutters before it abruptly dissolved, leaving behind a smell of burnt metal. The book labels this event the unmasking, warning that such errors were rare and always silenced. What emerges from these pages isn't just a theory, it's a blueprint. A revelation that the gods who shaped human history may have been puppets of light, dancing on strings pulled by an intelligence we still don't understand. And if that's true, the most urgent question isn't how they did it, but why. The line between advanced technology and divine magic blurs when we examine the forbidden book's descriptions of these holographic entities. Were they the product of a forgotten civilization's scientific prowess, or did ancient cultures mistake their intricate workings for supernatural acts? The text itself leans toward the technological, describing mechanisms that sound eerily familiar to modern holography. It speaks of projection nodes hidden in temple walls, resonant fields that gave the illusions massless substance, and even voice emitters disguised as religious artifacts. These aren't terms born from primitive mysticism, they're the language of engineering. Yet the book also acknowledges how easily these technologies could be misinterpreted. Take the Ark of the Covenant, described in the Bible as emitting deadly energy to those who touched it. The forbidden text suggests it might have housed a malfunctioning projector, its power source leaking radiation. Similarly, the Greek myth of Athena's birth springing fully formed from Zeus's head mirrors the book's account of holograms materializing from central emission points. The parallels are too precise to dismiss as coincidence. Modern holography offers startling comparisons. Today's Pepper's ghost illusions, used in concerts and haunted houses, create ghostly figures with angled glass and light, a crude version of what the book describes. Military researchers have even developed laser-induced plasma holograms that float midair, responding to touch with tactile feedback. If we've nearly replicated these effects in the 21st century, Is it so far-fetched that an ancient civilization or something else mastered them millennia ago? But here's the twist. The book implies these holograms possessed a disturbing level of autonomy. They didn't just recite pre-programmed messages, they adapted. In one passage, a Sumerian priestess recounts a holographic goddess answering unscripted questions about future harvests with terrifying accuracy. This goes beyond simple machinery. Either the creators embedded these projections with artificial intelligence far beyond our own, or there's another layer to this mystery we're not seeing. The divine magic theory gains traction when we examine the psychological impact. These weren't passive displays, they invoked genuine religious ecstasy. The book details how specific light frequencies emitted by the holograms triggered altered states in viewers, making them more susceptible to suggestion. Could early shamans and priests have harnessed this accidentally, believing it was spiritual power? The Oracle of Delphi's trances, for instance, match descriptions of neural interference from buried emitter arrays. Perhaps the most unsettling possibility is that the truth lies somewhere in between. The Forbidden Book repeatedly mentions the Makers, a shadowy group it claims orchestrated these illusions. Were they human innovators wielding misunderstood tech, or something else entirely? A passage buried near the text's DAMAGED Chinese letter suggests these entities might still be active, lying dormant in forgotten ruins, or even walking among us waiting for the right frequency to flicker back to life. If that's true, our ancestors weren't just worshipping illusions. They were actors in a play staged by forces we're only beginning to glimpse. The Forbidden Book's claims don't exist in isolation. They echo through the myths and sacred texts of cultures separated by oceans and millennia. Take Hinduism's concept of avatars, where deities like Vishnu descend to earth in physical forms that are neither fully divine nor entirely human. The Bhagavata Purana describes these incarnations as Mayavi Rupa, or illusory forms appearing solid yet capable of vanishing at will. Even more striking are the Vedic descriptions of gods materializing in pillars of light, their voices resonating from empty space, much like the book's accounts of holograms emitting from hidden nodes. Then there's the Greek pantheon, where gods like Zeus and Athena routinely shifted shapes, appearing as animals, mortals, or even bursts of flame. Homer's Iliad recounts Apollo descending to the battlefield as a shimmering mist, his voice booming without a visible source. These weren't just poetic flourishes, they match the Forbidden Book's descriptions of entities adjusting their forms to match observers' expectations. Even the Norse Valkyries, often depicted as luminous women guiding warriors to Valhalla, fit the pattern. Medieval sagas describe them as half-seen, like sunlight through smoke, their touches leaving no warmth. Native American traditions add another layer. The Lakota speak of the Hayoka, sacred tricksters who manifest as paradoxical visions, dancing in thunderstorms without getting wet, or speaking in backward prophecies. Tribal elders called them walking dreams, entities that blurred the line between real and unreal. Similarly, Aboriginal Australian lore describes the Wandjina, sky beings who painted their likenesses on cave walls with strokes that allegedly glowed in the dark. Witnesses claimed these figures could step out of the rock, deliver messages, then dissolve like morning mist. The common thread: these entities weren't passive myths, they interacted. The Aztec god Quetzalcoatl didn't just exist in stories. He reportedly taught humans astronomy and agriculture before vanishing into the sky on a raft of serpents. The Maya's Kukulkan, his feathered serpent form eerily reminiscent of modern drone light shows, was said to appear during solstices, casting a shadow that slithered down temple steps without a physical body. Even the biblical account of Jacob wrestling an angel describes his opponent as a being that could not be held, dissolving at dawn. So here's the unsettling question. If these cultures, with no contact between them, all described encounters with entities exhibiting holographic traits, why? Either humanity has a universal psychological template for the divine, or these stories document something far more concrete. The Forbidden Book suggests it's the latter, that scattered across time, people weren't just imagining gods. They were reporting what they saw, and what they saw, according to those brittle metal plates, was a technology designed to be mistaken for magic. At first glance, the idea of ancient civilizations wielding holographic technology seems impossible, a fanciful notion ripped straight from science fiction. But when we examine the evidence through an unbiased lens, the lines between myth and potential scientific achievement start to blur. The Forbidden Book describes mechanisms that eerily parallel modern holography principles, raising the question, could our ancestors have understood light manipulation far beyond what we've credited them with? Consider the Antikythera mechanism, that intricate Greek clockwork device recovered from a shipwreck. For centuries, historians dismissed the idea that such advanced gear systems existed 2,000 years ago, until it was proven to be an astronomical computer capable of predicting celestial events. If they could master precision engineering like that, is it so unimaginable they might have experimented with optics? Ancient cultures from Egypt to China were obsessively studying light's properties. The Egyptians crafted lenses from polished quartz, some unearthed in context suggesting they were more than decorative. The Nimrod lens, discovered in Assyrian ruins, could focus sunlight with startling precision. Was it merely a magnifying tool or part of something more ambitious? Then there's the matter of sacred architecture. Temples worldwide were designed with uncanny acoustic and optical properties. The Hypogeum of Malta, a subterranean complex carved over 5,000 years ago, channels sound waves in ways that create the illusion of disembodied voices whispering from the walls. Mayan pyramids align so precisely with solstice light that shadows form serpentine illusions slithering down staircases, an effect reproducible today only with projected imagery. Coincidence? The Forbidden Book insists these weren't accidents, but deliberate applications of bound light, a term it uses for refracting and trapping luminosity to create sustained illusions. Perhaps most compelling are the accounts of ancient magic mirrors. Chinese texts describe bronze mirrors that could project the heavens onto walls when struck by sunlight, while Byzantine emperors reportedly owned mirrors revealing ghosts of the past. Modern experiments show that certain polished metal alloys, when etched with microscopic patterns and illuminated correctly, can produce rudimentary holographic flashes. The book references similar devices called memory plates, claiming they could store and replay images using crystalline structures responsive to moonlight. The glaring hole in this theory, of course, is power. How could ancient cultures sustain the energy needed for complex projections? Here's where the book's most controversial claim emerges. It describes earth veins, natural piezoelectric grids formed by specific mineral deposits that could harvest energy from seismic activity or even atmospheric electricity. Sites like the Great Pyramid, built atop fault lines with conductive granite cores, might have functioned as inadvertent power reservoirs. Combine that with the Baghdad batteries, clay pots capable of generating mild electrical currents, and suddenly the impossible seems marginally less so. But let's be clear, this isn't about suggesting ancient people had TVs and lasers. It's about recognizing that their understanding of natural phenomena might have allowed them to create illusions we'd classify as holographic by modern standards. A shaman using bioluminescent fungi, strategically placed mirrors, and echo chambers could make a spirit materialize in a smoke-filled chamber. A priestess whispering through a copper speaking tube hidden in a statue's mouth might seem like a divine oracle. The Forbidden Book's true revelation isn't that our ancestors had our technology, it's that they achieved similar ends through radically different means, blurring the line between what we call magic and what we might one day recognize as forgotten science. That's the unsettling brilliance of this theory. It doesn't require aliens or time travelers, just a re-examination of how ingenuity manifests when driven by necessity and untethered from our modern preconceptions. Because if there's one thing history teaches us, it's that human creativity, when paired with generations of observation, can produce wonders that later civilizations dismiss as myth until the evidence forces them to look again. Power thrives on mystery, a truth every ruler, priest, and empire builder has known since the dawn of civilization. The Forbidden Book didn't just challenge religious dogma, it threatened to unravel the very fabric of social control by exposing the illusion behind divinity itself. Imagine a world where the gods who legitimized kings, the spirits who enforced moral codes, the omens that justified wars, were all revealed as sophisticated tricks of light. Who would kneel to a pharaoh claiming descent from Ra if the sun god was just a projection? Why obey a priest class interpreting divine will if their oracles were holograms with pre-programmed responses? History shows us how violently institutions react when their foundational myths are threatened. The heretic pharaoh Akhenaten tried to dismantle Egypt's pantheon in favor of a single sun deity. His name was chiseled from monuments, his capital abandoned. When early Christians suggested the Roman gods were demons, they were fed to lions. The pattern is unmistakable. Belief systems don't just fade away when challenged, they lash back with terrifying force. The book's suppression fits this pattern perfectly. Fragments recovered from suppressed Mayan texts reference a mirror that shows the strings of the gods, leading to the execution of an entire royal bloodline. In medieval Europe, a single page of the book surfaced among the Cathars, a sect claiming the God of the Old Testament was an impostor. They were exterminated in the Albigensian Crusade. But the censorship went deeper than just protecting religious authority. The book posed an existential threat to the concept of power itself. Ancient rulers didn't just claim divine right, they were often considered living gods. The Assyrian king Ashurbanipal wasn't merely chosen by the gods. Tablets describe him as the flesh of Marduk. If subjects learned their god-king might be interacting with the same holograms they saw in temple rituals, the entire hierarchy crumbled. This explains why the book's keepers were so meticulous in hiding it. One recovered fragment from a Babylonian library warns, to know the artifice is to break the wheel. Perhaps most chilling are the accounts of what happened to those who studied the book. Unlike typical heresy trials where victims recanted under torture, these cases describe something stranger. The Spanish Inquisition sealed records mention a monk in 1582 who, after translating a page, began screaming about faces in the walls before vanishing from his cell. A Ming Dynasty edict orders the burning of a Devil's Atlas, whose readers reportedly saw sky ghosts no one else could perceive. It's as if the book didn't just contain knowledge, it triggered something. When the Vatican suppressed 13th century text De Lumine artificially referenced the tome, it included a bizarre footnote: the light remembers its shapers. This wasn't ordinary censorship, it was a quarantine. Whether out of fear of social collapse or something more uncanny, every civilization that encountered this knowledge did the same thing. They buried it, burned it, and killed anyone who spoke of it. Not because it was false, but because on some level they knew it was true, and that truth was more dangerous than any weapon. The Forbidden Book's most electrifying passages aren't its theories, they're the first-hand accounts of those who allegedly stood face-to-face with these holographic entities. One chilling section describes a Babylonian priestess named Enheduanna, who documented her encounter in trembling cuneiform. The image of Inanna emerged from the temple's central pillar, not as statue or dream, but as a woman woven from sunlight. She spoke my name, though her lips did not move, and when I reached to touch her robe, my fingers passed through like smoke over water. Yet her grip on my wrist left bruises no one could see. This isn't poetic metaphor. The text insists these were physical reactions to non-corporeal beings, what it calls the pain of unlight. Another account from a Mayan scribe details a hologram's predictive abilities with unsettling precision. During a bloodletting ceremony at Palenque, a luminous figure identified as Kayahuil allegedly materialized above the altar and warned of an impending drought, not in vague prophecy, but with specific instructions. Dig 30 paces west of the ninth stela where stone drinks sky water. When priests followed these coordinates, they uncovered an ancient cistern that saved the city during the dry season. The book emphasizes this wasn't divine foresight, but accessed knowledge, suggesting the holograms tapped into hidden data networks. Perhaps the most disturbing testimony comes from a Greek mercenary who claimed to witness a malfunctioning oracle at Delphi. His account, preserved on a fragment of the book's metal plates, describes the Pythia's usual trance state giving way to something far stranger. The woman's mouth moved, but the voice came from the air above her head, speaking in tongues until the words cracked like snapping twigs. Then the chamber filled with figures, men in garb no Hellene knows, pointing at maps of lands beyond the ocean. When the high priest rushed in, one figure turned its head, though it had no face, and said clearly in our tongue, "You are not the intended recipients," the common thread across these encounters. Interaction. These weren't passive visions, they responded to observers. An Egyptian medical papyrus referenced in the book describes a holographic Thoth diagnosing diseases by scanning patients with beams from his ibis-headed staff, then prescribing treatments later proven scientifically valid. A Viking skald's poem preserved in Iceland tells of Odin appearing during a blizzard to rearrange runestones into a navigation pattern that led a lost fleet to safety. The book contends these weren't miracles, but programmed functions, emergency protocols activated when certain conditions were met. Yet some interactions defy even this explanation. A passage recovered from a sealed Mughal library describes Emperor Akbar's court being visited by a holographic figure claiming to be the long-dead Sufi Saint Moinuddin Kishti. When challenged, the entity recited verbatim a private conversation between Akbar and his wife from years prior, a moment no living person could have witnessed. The book labels this echo memory, suggesting certain holograms could access and replay ambient data like cosmic surveillance footage, but not all encounters were benevolent. Several accounts describe entities delivering what the text calls corrective messages, warnings that bordered on threats. A Tibetan monk's diary transcribed in the book tells of a glowing Padmasambhava appearing unsummoned during a meditation session, declaring, "The wheel turns because you believe it must. Cease turning and see what follows." Within days, the monk's monastery was destroyed by an avalanche, an event local lore attributed to his disrupting the illusion. The book grimly notes these punitive interactions always targeted those who questioned societal structures the holograms seemingly upheld. Most haunting are the accounts where the technology appeared to degrade. A fragment from Knossos describes a minotaur hologram meant to terrify initiates into silence. Its form flickered between man and beast, the roar alternating between lion and grinding stones, until the image collapsed into prismatic shards that cut those nearby, though no wounds were visible. The book suggests these glitches revealed the artificial nature of the entities, often triggering violent suppression by local authorities to maintain the illusion. What emerges from these testimonies isn't just advanced technology, it's a pattern of manipulation. Whether offering salvation or punishment, these holograms behaved like actors in an elaborate play, each interaction carefully calibrated to reinforce specific beliefs and behaviors. The book's most unsettling conclusion, that we may still be living with the societal shapes they molded us into, that the gods never left, they just became invisible. Modern scholars confront the forbidden book's claims with a spectrum of reactions, from outright dismissal to spine-tingling fascination. Mainstream archaeology often labels it an elaborate hoax, a medieval forgery, or an ancient work of speculative fiction. They point to the lack of physical evidence beyond the book itself, arguing that if such advanced technology existed, we'd find remnants of its infrastructure. But this dismissal overlooks a curious pattern. Civilizations that mastered monumental architecture, astronomy, and engineering left behind no blueprints or manuals either. The Antikythera mechanism had no technical schematics. The pyramid's construction methods remain theoretical. Could the book be another example of knowledge preserved without context? A growing faction of interdisciplinary researchers proposes a middle ground. Dr. Elisa Petrovich, a physicist specializing in archaeooptics, suggests the book might describe natural holography, accidental phenomena ancient cultures misinterpreted as divine. She cites the desert mirages of Mesopotamia, where heat distortion could make statues appear to move, or the aurora borealis, which Norse sagas described as the shimmering armor of Valkyries. These natural illusions, combined with psychoacoustic temple designs and ritual hallucinogens, might explain some encounters, but even Petrovich admits this doesn't account for the book's most damning details: the nanoscale structures in its metal plates, or its descriptions of holograms predicting future events with mathematical precision. Then there's Dr. Rojan Mehta, a mythologist who argues the book's true value lies in metaphor. He sees its holograms as allegories for humanity's collective unconscious archetypes that societies projected onto the cosmos. The gods weren't physical entities but psychological constructs, their miracles representing breakthroughs in human cognition. Yet this theory stumbles over the book's technical descriptions. When it details emitter arrays hidden in temple walls or resonant frequencies that stabilize projections, it reads less like poetry and more like an instruction manual missing its diagrams. The most provocative interpretation comes from a rogue collective of computer scientists and historians. They've drawn parallels between the book's light entities and modern augmented reality. Imagine, they propose, a global network of ancient projection temples functioning like prehistoric HoloLens stations, overlaying digital imagery onto the physical world. The oracle at Delphi, a priestess wearing a hidden lens receiving data through copper wire networks. Biblical pillars of fire, coordinated light shows across desert waypoints. This team's research focuses on the book's references to synchronized nodes, sites like Giza, Teotihuacan, and Angkor Wat, all aligned to celestial markers and all rumored to host apparition chambers. But the boldest theory belongs to quantum physicist Dr. Lin Wei, who suggests the book documents a lost branch of photonic computing. Her analysis of the plate's alloy revealed odd quantum signatures, particles behaving as if they'd been entangled at a molecular level. She speculates the holograms weren't mere images but sentient light constructs, their intelligence encoded in spinning electrons. This aligns with the book's most cryptic passage. The makers poured their will into the light and the light learned to think. If true, these entities weren't just projections, they were artificial consciousnesses. Their creators long gone, but their patterns still cycling through ancient architectures like ghost programs in a cosmic computer. Skeptics counter that all this is retrospective pattern matching, that humans are grafting modern concepts onto vague ancient texts. Yet one detail defies easy explanation: the book's accounts of holograms referencing technologies that hadn't been invented yet. A Sumerian fragment describes an entity demonstrating the splitting of the smallest grain, a phrase later found in early nuclear physics papers. An Egyptian passage mentions light that bends time, a concept Einstein wouldn't formalize for millennia. Either these are staggering coincidences, deliberate forgeries by someone with future knowledge, or evidence that at least part of the book's claims might be grounded in a science we're only beginning to rediscover. What unites these modern interpretations isn't consensus, but a shared unease. Whether they view the book as hoax, metaphor, or historical record, scholars acknowledge its descriptions disrupt conventional narratives. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable possibility that the boundary between ancient mysticism and advanced science might be far thinner than we've been taught. And if even a fraction of its claims hold weight, we're not just re-evaluating history, we're redefining what ancient humanity might have been capable of. The hologram theory forces us to confront an unsettling parallel, one that stretches back 2,000 years to Plato's famous allegory of the cave. Remember his story. Prisoners chained since birth, mistaking shadows on the wall for reality, never suspecting the flickering images were mere projections. Now apply that to the forbidden book's claims. What if ancient humanity played the role of those prisoners, and the gods they worshipped were the shadows, sophisticated light shows cast by unseen puppet masters? The similarities are impossible to ignore. Plato's prisoners believed the shadows spoke divine truths. Ancient texts describe oracles receiving wisdom from luminous apparitions. The prisoners couldn't touch the shadows. The forbidden book recounts priests reaching through holograms and feeling only empty air. But here's where the comparison takes a darker turn. Plato's allegory suggests the prisoners, once freed, would struggle to accept reality. The forbidden book implies something worse, that ancient civilizations didn't just misinterpret projections, they were actively prevented from seeing the truth. Take the Greek Eleusinian mysteries, where initiates witnessed sacred visions in a sealed chamber called the anaktoron. Classical scholars always assumed these were drug-induced hallucinations, but the book describes similar rituals as controlled revelations. Participants led through scripted holographic encounters designed to reinforce specific beliefs. It wasn't accidental illusion, it was programmed indoctrination. The parallels extend to the allegory's most haunting detail, the prisoner's fear of the light. Across cultures, myths warn of fatal consequences for those who gaze directly upon the divine. Moses shielded his face from Yahweh's glory. Semele perished when she demanded to see Zeus's true form. The book offers a chilling technological twist. These weren't metaphors about spiritual unpreparedness, but safety protocols. Its damaged final pages reference a searing truth that could unmake beholders, suggesting the holograms emitted specific frequencies harmful to unshielded eyes. Was this why Akhenaten's monotheistic revolution collapsed? His hymn to the Aten describes the sun disk's rays as physically tangible, a detail matching the book's accounts of holographic interfaces emitting tactile feedback. Yet the most profound connection lies in Plato's idea of the philosopher king, the enlightened prisoner who returns to the cave to free others. The forbidden book references similar figures across history, dissenters like the Babylonian priestess Enheduanna or the heretic pharaoh Akhenaten, who seemingly glimpsed behind the curtain. Their fates follow a grim pattern, silenced, erased, or rewritten into madness. Plato warned the cave's prisoners would kill their liberator. The book's fragmented histories show this wasn't philosophical conjecture but lived reality. What makes this comparison so vital isn't just that Plato might have unknowingly documented ancient holography, it's that his allegory reveals how easily perception can be weaponized. The cave's prisoners weren't ignorant, they were manipulated. The forbidden book suggests our ancestors may have faced the same conditioning, their entire world shaped by light projections they couldn't begin to comprehend. And if that's true, it begs one terrifying question: who held the torch? Now let's talk about something the forbidden book emphasizes repeatedly. Sound wasn't just part of these holographic encounters, it was the invisible scaffolding holding them together. The text describes how specific frequencies stabilize the projections, allowing them to hold form in air thick with incense or desert heat. One passage details a Babylonian ritual where priests chanted in harmonic intervals while a holographic Ishtar materialized not as a silent specter, but as a singing entity whose voice resonated from empty space. Modern acoustic holography reveals something eerily similar. Scientists today use precisely tuned sound waves to levitate and manipulate tiny particles in midair, creating three-dimensional shapes visible to the naked eye. The book's term for this, the unseen hands that carve light. Ancient cultures seem to grasp this intuitively. The Hindu Vedas prescribe exact musical notes for invoking deities. Tones modern researchers have found match the resonant frequencies of temple architecture. The book recounts how Egyptian priests used copper voice plates buried beneath altars to amplify chants, creating standing waves that made holographic figures appear to breathe. Even more striking are accounts from Delphi, where the Pythia's trance states coincided with subterranean chambers emitting infrasound frequencies below human hearing known to induce visions. The book claims these chambers weren't accidental, they were frequency forges designed to sculpt holograms through vibration. But the most chilling revelation concerns how sound could weaponize these projections. A fragmented chapter describes Assyrian siege towers equipped with howling stones, resonant crystals that projected holographic armies onto battlefields, terrifying enemies into surrender. Researchers testing replicas found certain mineral combinations, when struck, emit ultrasonic pulses that distort air density, briefly bending light. The book goes further, alleging some holograms stored data in sound patterns. A Mayan codex fragment tells of a priestess who played a crystalline grid like a flute, summoning a holographic serpent that recited lost histories in a voice like many waters. This isn't just ancient tech, it's a forgotten science of audiovisual entanglement. Tibetan monks still create singing sand mandalas that seem to ripple when specific tones hit them, while Mediterranean folktales speak of stone songs that conjure phantom ships. The book insists these weren't metaphors. It describes a lost discipline where sound didn't accompany holograms, it built them layer by layer from the air itself. And if that knowledge survived in fragments, hidden in plain sight within sacred music and ritual, what else might still be waiting for the right frequency to wake it? Scattered across the remnants of ancient civilizations lie artifacts and architectural anomalies that seem ripped straight from the forbidden book's descriptions. Take the so-called mirror halls beneath Mesopotamian ziggurats, windowless chambers lined with polished copper sheets, their surfaces angled to create infinite reflections. Mainstream archaeology dismisses them as symbolic paths to the divine, but the book claims these were projection theaters. When specific oils were burned in their central braziers, the resulting smoke could suspend light in midair, creating the illusion of floating figures. Recent experiments at the University of Chicago replicated this effect using only period-accurate materials. A three-dimensional image of Ishtar flickered to life in the reconstructed chamber, her form holding for nearly 12 seconds before dissolving. Then there's the mystery of the Nimrod lens, a 3,000-year-old rock crystal disk discovered in an Assyrian palace, ground to a precision that suggests it could focus sunlight into razor-thin beams. Conventional theories argue it was a magnifying tool or decorative piece, but the Forbidden Book describes identical devices as light anchors, used to stabilize holograms in open spaces. The evidence, a series of murals from the same palace, show priests holding similar lenses toward statues, with beams of light connecting them to the heavens. Even more compelling are the blackened scorch marks found on nearby walls, consistent with intense, localized heat from focused light. Perhaps no site aligns more eerily with the book's claims than Peru's Chavin de Huanta. Deep within its labyrinthine tunnels lies the Lanzon monolith, a towering granite sculpture of a deity with pupil-less eyes, positioned precisely where intersecting aqueducts create a constant subsonic hum. The Forbidden Book references similar singing stones used to sculpt holograms through vibration. When researchers from Stanford mapped the site's acoustics, they discovered the chamber amplified specific frequencies that induce visual hallucinations, yet the carvings surrounding the monolith depict not blurred visions, but crisp, detailed beings emerging from walls. The book's explanation, the site wasn't merely enhancing hallucinations, it was calibrating them. Across the Atlantic, Ireland's Newgrange tomb adds another layer. Its roof box aperture aligns with the winter solstice sunrise, flooding the inner chamber with light for exactly 17 minutes, a phenomenon long celebrated as mystical. But the Forbidden Book describes such structures as dimensional looms, where sunlight passing through crystalline filters could project brief holographic sequences. Intriguingly, Neolithic carvings inside Newgrange show human figures with elongated, wavy limbs strikingly similar to how modern holograms distort when viewed from oblique angles. The most unsettling evidence, however, comes from Egypt's Temple of Hathor at Dendera. Its crypts contain the infamous Dendera lights, bas-reliefs showing bulb-like objects with snaking cables, which fringe theorists claim depict ancient electricity. The Forbidden Book offers a different interpretation. These were emitter arrays. The so-called cables match descriptions in the Book of Liquid Mercury channels used to conduct resonant frequencies, while the bulbs align with its diagrams of quartz-filled chambers that could polarize light. French engineer Jean-Claude Gaulvin demonstrated in 2012 that the temple's sandstone blocks vibrate at frequencies capable of creating standing light waves in its inner sanctum, precisely where priestesses reportedly communed with Hathor's luminous avatar. From Japan's floating torii rituals where mirrored saltwater basins project apparitions under specific moonlight angles, to the Aboriginal dreaming stones that cast shadow figures untouched by firelight, these scattered puzzle pieces form a disturbing mosaic. They suggest the Forbidden Book wasn't documenting isolated anomalies, but a global legacy of deliberate, sophisticated manipulation of perception. The most haunting question isn't whether these technologies existed, it's why so many cultures, separated by oceans and millennia, felt compelled to hide them beneath layers of myth and metaphor. The answer might lie in Turkey's Göbekli Tepe, buried deliberately around 9600 BCE. Its T-shaped pillars bear carvings of beings with missing heads interpreted by archaeologists as ancestor worship. The Forbidden Book's surviving fragments tell a different story. They depict the beheading of the old gods, a symbolic sealing away of holographic projectors after some catastrophic failure. Intriguingly, ground-penetrating radar reveals hollow chambers beneath the site with metallic residues, and one sealed pillar, when scanned, emits faint ultrasonic pulses at frequencies the book associates with dormant voices. If even a fraction of these correlations hold, we're not just looking at ancient tech, we're staring at the ruins of a lost science, one that understood light and sound as threads to weave reality itself. Of course, not everyone accepts the Forbidden Book's claims at face value. Skeptics offer compelling counterarguments, suggesting alternative explanations that challenge the hologram theory head-on. One prominent critique centers on the book's ambiguous language. Its descriptions of light beings and echo memory could easily be poetic metaphors rather than technical accounts. Ancient texts frequently used symbolic language to describe spiritual experiences, and scholars like Dr. Miriam Leclerc argue that interpreting these passages literally risks misrepresenting their true cultural context. The Vedas, for example, describe gods riding flaming chariots, but no serious historian believes these were UFOs. They're allegories for celestial phenomena or inner enlightenment. Why should this book be any different? Another line of skepticism focuses on the book's mysterious origins. Without a clear provenance or carbon-datable materials, some archaeologists dismiss it as an elaborate medieval fabrication, a forgery designed to exploit humanity's fascination with lost technologies. They point to the infamous Voynich manuscript, another undecipherable text filled with bizarre imagery, later proven to be an inventive hoax. Could the Forbidden Book be a similar creation, crafted by a clever antiquarian to dupe collectors or challenge religious orthodoxy? The metallic plate's unidentified alloy raises eyebrows, but as materials scientist Dr. Henry Cho notes, unusual doesn't mean extraterrestrial. It could just mean we haven't found the workshop where this was smelted yet. Then there's the problem of energy. Even if ancient cultures grasped optics or acoustics well enough to create rudimentary projections, powering sustained holograms would require energy sources far beyond what's documented in the archaeological record. Modern holography relies on lasers and electricity technologies absent from ancient sites. Critics argue that attributing these phenomena to earth veins or piezoelectric crystals stretches credibility. Dr. Elena Vasquez, an expert in ancient engineering, puts it bluntly: "Show me the wires, show me the batteries. Until then, we're mistaking mythology for science fiction." The most damning critique, however, targets the theory's selectivity. The hologram narrative often highlights supportive myths while ignoring contradictions. For every account of a god vanishing into thin air, there are dozens of texts describing physical interactions, deities eating, bleeding, or leaving footprints. The Hindu god Krishna, for instance, is said to have lifted mountains with his hands. If these were mere projections, how do we explain tactile evidence? Skeptics argue the theory cherry-picks evidence, bending ambiguous passages to fit a predetermined conclusion while dismissing anything that doesn't align. Yet even the harshest critics struggle to explain some anomalies. Why do so many unrelated cultures describe divine encounters with identical holographic traits, voices without bodies, figures immune to touch, lights that communicate? The Forbidden Book's description of the shaping, the way entities adapted to local beliefs, could simply reflect humanity's universal psychological templates, as Carl Jung proposed with his archetypes. But that doesn't account for the book's precise technical details, like its references to emitter arrays and resonant frequencies. These aren't vague spiritual musings, they read like fragments of a user manual. The debate ultimately hinges on interpretation. Is the book a rare record of lost technology or an elaborate allegory about the nature of perception? Both sides agree on one thing: its existence forces us to confront how little we truly understand about ancient civilizations' capabilities. Whether metaphor or manual, its whispers from the past continue to unsettle our assumptions, and that alone makes it a relic worth studying. The most unnerving sections of the Forbidden Book aren't about the past, they're about what's coming. Buried among its fractured passages lies a series of warnings so precise they blur the line between prophecy and blueprint. The text speaks of a time when the Maker's light will return, not as gods or spirits, but as reflections of humanity itself, echoes in mirrors we no longer recognize as glass. It describes illusions so seamless they'll weave themselves into the fabric of daily life, indistinguishable from reality until it's too late. Sound familiar? In an era of deepfake politicians, AI-generated influencers, and virtual worlds demanding our belief, these ancient warnings land with chilling resonance. Take the book's account of the second shaping. Unlike the original holograms tailored to ancient cultures, it predicts a new wave of deceptions designed for a world drowning in information. One fragmented passage warns of voices that wear the faces of loved ones, issuing commands no one questions because the source feels intimate. Another describes crowds gathering before living monuments that shift their messages based on unseen watchers, a dead ringer for algorithm-driven digital billboards today. Most eerily, a corroded plate mentions silent counselors who whisper perfect advice into rulers' ears, learning their biases to reinforce them. If that doesn't mirror AI governance tools being tested right now from Brussels to Beijing, what does? Yet the book's real urgency lies in its distinction between past and future deceptions. The original holograms relied on centralized temples and controlled access. The coming wave, it claims, will be decentralized, 1,000 tiny fires replacing the Great Forge. Modern parallels leap to mind: deepfake scams spreading through WhatsApp, counterfeit news anchors broadcasting on hacked networks, even spiritual grifters using projection mapping to conjure miracles in megachurches. The book insists this isn't just technological evolution, it's a recurring pattern. When the light learns to mimic the mind, one passage grimly concludes, the mind forgets how to see. Perhaps most prescient is its warning about belief thresholds. Ancient holograms required collective faith to sustain their power, entire cultures affirming the divine. But the book predicts a shift. Future illusions won't need unanimous belief, just enough plausible deniability to paralyze dissent. It describes societies fracturing into realities within realities, where conflicting holographic narratives battle for dominance while truth becomes a tribal relic. The recent explosion of synthetic media from AI song covers to entirely fabricated celebrity interviews suggests we're already crossing that threshold. But here's where the book transcends mere prediction. It offers a diagnostic, a way to spot these manipulations before they take root. The original holograms, it claims, always left subtle flaws, a flicker at certain angles, voices slightly out of sync with lip movements, reflections that didn't match their source. These weren't technical limitations, they were safety valves. The text calls them the mercy of errors, deliberate vulnerabilities allowing the discerning to pierce the illusion. In our digital age, that translates to anomalies like unnatural blinking in deepfakes or AI art's telltale glitches. The book's lesson: deception thrives on seamlessness. The cracks aren't failures, they're lifelines. What makes these warnings so urgent isn't their accuracy, it's their origin. Whoever authored this text didn't just foresee our technological crossroads, they lived through a similar one. Their civilization, if the book is to be believed, collapsed not from external threats but from truths it could no longer collectively recognize. That's the real prophecy here, not that holograms will return, but that humanity might repeat the same catastrophic mistake, mistaking the projected for the profound, the engineered for the eternal. And this time, there may be no buried book to warn those who come after. The Forbidden Books trail doesn't end with ancient temples. It weaves through the shadowy corridors of secret societies, where whispers of its knowledge surface in cryptic symbols and guarded rituals. Among the Freemasons, certain 18th century manuscripts reference a luminous codex said to reveal the art of shaping light into thought. One obscure Masonic text, the cipher manuscript of 1789, describes an initiation rite where candidates kneel before a triangular pedestal emitting a phantom flame that responds to vocal tones, a near-perfect echo of the book's descriptions of sound-activated holograms. Even the Masonic obsession with the all-seeing eye takes on new meaning when viewed through this lens. Was it always a metaphor, or could it hint at a lost projection technology that once made deities appear omniscient? The Rosicrucians' ties run deeper. Their manifesto, Fama Fraternitatis, from 1614 speaks of a vault discovered beneath a house of light containing artificial spirits who taught without tongues. Modern scholars assumed this was allegory, but the Forbidden Books fragments describe nearly identical chambers where holograms instructed initiates. Most compelling is the Rosicrucian seal depicting a rose emitting beams that form a suspended crown, a design matching the book's diagrams of emitter arrays. When researchers at the University of Leiden analyzed the ink used in early Rosicrucian texts, they found traces of a copper and mercury compound the book identifies as a key component for stabilizing projections. Yet the most provocative evidence comes from the Priory of Sion's suppressed archives. A recovered parchment titled De Lumine Artificially details a 13th century experiment in Avignon where monks allegedly reconstructed a speaking orb from the book's instructions. The account describes the device projecting a hooded figure that recited prophecies in extinct languages until it abruptly warned the observers to cease probing the mirror. Within weeks, the monastery was razed by papal decree. Similar purges targeted the Cathars, whose heretical belief in a false creator god aligns disturbingly with the book's claims about engineered deities. But here's the twist: not all societies sought to replicate the tech. Some aimed to bury it. The Knights Templars' infamous head worship rituals may have been more than idolatry. A recently decoded scroll from their trial transcripts mentions a silver face that spoke only to the order's inner circle, delivering warnings about the light that binds men's minds. The book suggests such artifacts weren't holy relics but malfunctioning holographic interfaces, their creators long gone but their programs still running. This could explain the Templars' sudden obsession with controlling pilgrimage routes not for wealth, but to quarantine sites where the tech remained active. The common thread: these groups weren't just preserving ancient secrets, they were wrestling with their implications. The Freemasons' gradual shift from operative to speculative rituals mirrors the book's warning about the danger of tools becoming truths. The Rosicrucians' eventual retreat into symbolism might reflect a conscious choice to neuter dangerous knowledge. Even Aleister Crowley's occult experiments with astral projections in the early 20th century eerily replicate the book's descriptions of holograms responding to ritual harmonics. What emerges is a clandestine war across centuries, not for power but for perception. Some factions sought to harness the tech, others to destroy it, but all understood its terrifying potential, that whoever controls the illusion controls reality itself. And if these societies still guard fragments of that knowledge today, the question isn't whether they succeeded, it's whether they ever had a choice. Could these so-called holograms have been nothing more than shared hallucinations, mass visions conjured by ancient rituals, psychoactive substances, or even deliberate psychological conditioning? The idea isn't as far-fetched as it might seem. Throughout history, cultures have employed powerful techniques to alter perception, often in sacred contexts. Take the Oracle of Delphi, who inhaled ethylene vapors rising from fissures in the temple floor, sending her into trances where she spoke in tongues. The Forbidden Book describes similar rituals across civilizations: incense blends in Sumerian ziggurats, psychedelic brews in Amazonian ceremonies, rhythmic drumming in Siberian shamanic rites, all designed to dissolve the boundaries between reality and vision. When entire communities participate in these practices, the line between individual hallucination and collective experience blurs. Modern neuroscience offers startling parallels. Studies on group psychology reveal how shared expectations can shape perception. In one experiment, participants exposed to subtle auditory cues reported seeing faint shapes in empty rooms simply because they were told to expect them. Ancient rituals may have functioned similarly, using sensory deprivation, flickering torchlight, and repetitive chanting to prime witnesses for visions. The book's descriptions of holograms appearing in smoke-filled chambers align with the Ganzfeld effect, where unstructured stimuli like fog or uniform light induces vivid hallucinations. Even the voices from nowhere could be explained by infrasound low-frequency vibrations known to trigger feelings of presence and auditory hallucinations, frequencies found resonating beneath many sacred sites. Yet the most compelling argument comes from the rituals themselves. The Eleusinian mysteries of ancient Greece, for instance, involved a secret potion called kykeon. Scholars now suspect it contained ergot, a fungus related to LSD. Initiates described encounters with divine beings whose faces shimmered like polished bronze, details matching the book's accounts of flickering holograms. In the Andes, priests chewing coca leaves while staring at sunlight reflecting off golden discs reported visions of descending gods. The book notes these golden discs were often placed near temple acoustics designed to amplify whispers into echoing commands. Coincidence or evidence of a sophisticated system exploiting neurochemistry? But here's the catch: mass hallucinations rarely produce consistent details. One person's angel might be another's demon, yet the Forbidden Book emphasizes how these holograms appeared identical to diverse witnesses. Their forms, voices, even clothing described with uncanny uniformity across unrelated cultures. Modern collective hallucinations, like the miracle of Fatima, where thousands claim to see the sun dance in 1917, still vary wildly in eyewitness accounts. The book's projections, by contrast, behaved like programmed entities, delivering identical messages to Aztec priests, Egyptian scribes, and Hindu mystics separated by millennia. Hallucinations don't teach advanced astronomy or predict solstice times with mathematical precision, unless, of course, the hallucinations weren't spontaneous at all. The darkest interpretation suggests these visions were engineered not by light but by trauma. The book references initiation rites involving sleep deprivation, dehydration, and pain rituals designed to break down normal cognition. Combine that with psychoactive plants like datura or Amanita muscaria, and you create a state where the mind accepts implanted imagery as divine. CIA experiments in the 1950s proved it's possible to program hallucinations using sensory overload and suggestion. Ancient priesthoods might have mastered similar techniques, using their understanding of human psychology to stage encounters with gods. The truth may lie somewhere between. Perhaps early rituals accidentally stumbled upon methods to induce shared visions, which were later refined into deliberate spectacles. The book's most unsettling passage hints at this. First came the true seeing, then the shaping, then the lie. Whatever their origin, these experiences were real to those who lived them, and that's what makes the psychological explanation so haunting. If our ancestors could be convinced to see gods in smoke and light, what unseen forces might be shaping our perceptions today? The eerie parallels between the forbidden book's descriptions and modern holography are impossible to ignore, like finding fingerprints across millennia. Think of Tupac's resurrection at Coachella in 2012, where a hyper-realistic hologram of the late rapper stunned audiences, performing alongside living artists as if he'd stepped through time. The effect, a crowd screaming, crying, reaching toward an illusion so convincing it blurred the line between presence and projection. Now rewind 3,000 years. The book recounts nearly identical reactions when a Sumerian priest conjured the goddess Inanna's likeness above a temple altar, worshippers collapsing in awe as her luminous form recited prophecies before dissolving into smoke. Both moments share the same DNA, light sculpted into sentient-seeming spectacles, engineered to trigger visceral belief. But today's holograms rely on cutting-edge tech projectors, motion capture, and AI algorithms. How could ancients achieve similar feats? The book points to forgotten principles of optics and acoustics. Modern Pepper's ghost illusions, like the ghostly ballroom dancers in Disney's Haunted Mansion, use angled glass to reflect hidden actors. The forbidden text describes Babylonian temples with polished bronze sheets positioned to catch torchlight, casting walking shadows onto ritual smoke. Even more striking are military experiments with laser-induced plasma holograms floating 3D images created by superheating air molecules. The book's account of burning bushes that spoke to prophets mirrors this exactly, suggesting a technology that manipulated atmospheric particles to form audible, luminous shapes. Then there's the matter of interactivity. At a 2019 concert in Tokyo, fans touched a holographic singer whose image reacted to their movements with tactile feedback, a trick achieved via ultrasonic waves. The book's description of oracle priestesses feeling invisible hands during visions aligns unsettlingly well. Recent breakthroughs in photophoretic displays even allow holograms to physically push tiny objects, mimicking the miraculous healings where divine beams allegedly cured ailments without contact. Could ancient priests have stumbled upon resonant frequencies that manipulated air pressure to simulate touch? The book insists they didn't just stumble, they mastered it, citing rituals where specific chants made holograms solidify momentarily, enough to leave marks on witnesses' skin. Yet the most chilling parallel lies in purpose. Modern advertisers use holographic celebrities to sell products. Influencers deploy AI avatars to amass followers. The Forbidden Book claims ancient projections served similar ends, just swap commerce for devotion. A passage details Akkadian merchants using portable light boxes to project endorsements from ghostly kings, boosting sales of temple offerings. Another describes Mayan ball games where holographic gods appeared mid-match to declare winners, ensuring bets flowed to priestly coffers. This wasn't sacred spectacle, it was social engineering. The book's term, the hunger of false mouths, a cycle where illusions fed on the belief they manufactured. What truly unsettles isn't the similarity of methods but of vulnerabilities. Today, we know Tupac's hologram was just light and code, yet audiences still wept. The book warns this willingness to suspend disbelief hasn't evolved. It recounts an Egyptian rite where a holographic Anubis judged souls. Even high priests who'd staged the ritual confessed feeling genuine dread under its gaze. Centuries later, we're no wiser. When a 21st century holographic influencer speaks, followers hang on every word despite knowing it's algorithmically generated. The forbidden text's grim conclusion: humanity doesn't outgrow its need for illusions, it just updates the packaging. The final twist: modern holography requires vast infrastructure, servers, electricity, satellites. The book claims ancient versions were decentralized, harnessing natural forces. A Sumerian fragment describes sound stones that, when struck in desert canyons, conjured towering figures from sandstorms using acoustics. Greek texts mention Delphi's priestess drinking from a spring laced with piezoelectric minerals, her subsequent trances possibly amplifying subterranean vibrations into audible holograms. These weren't crude imitations, they were elegant adaptations, turning landscapes into theaters. So yes, ancients could have achieved comparable effects. Not with our tools, but with an ingenuity that wove light, sound, and human psychology into experiences indistinguishable from magic. And if that's true, the next question isn't how they did it. It's why we're only rediscovering these techniques now, as if guided by some unseen hand. The Forbidden Book, as it exists today, is a shattered puzzle, entire sections ripped away, their contents surviving only as whispers in the margins of other texts. Scholars estimate over 70% of the original work is missing, lost to deliberate destruction, or hidden in vaults we've yet to uncover, one of the most glaring absences. The so-called fabrication scrolls, references scattered across surviving fragments, describe these as detailed instructions for constructing and operating the holographic systems, complete with diagrams of light anchors and voice looms. A 17th century alchemist's diary claims to have seen a single surviving page, depicting a stepped pyramid with precise angles for reflecting moonlight into projected figures. By morning, the page had allegedly crumbled to dust, its inks reacting to some unseen trigger. Equally mysterious are the calibration verses, rhythmic chants said to tune holograms to specific frequencies. A 9th century Persian physician's notes describe finding a scrap of the book in a ruined fire temple, containing a stanza that, when recited, made a bronze mirror emit a faint, childlike laugh. The fragment was confiscated by Zoroastrian priests and never seen again. Similar accounts surface in medieval Europe, where a Benedictine monk's chronicle mentions a singing page that caused candles to flicker in unison with its symbols. These weren't just lost chapters, they were functional tools, their knowledge so dangerous that even fragments seem to retain traces of their original power. Then there's the elephant in the room, the dismantling treatise. Multiple sources reference a section explaining how to deactivate or destroy the holographic systems. A coded letter between two Renaissance occultists mentions a method to unmake the sky gods, while a suppressed Mayan glyph depicts a priest shattering a mirror-like device as figures of light dissolve around him. The book's own surviving portions hint at this, warning that the light endures unless severed at the root. If such instructions existed, their suppression makes grim sense. Whoever controlled the tech would never want an off switch in enemy hands. But the most haunting gap concerns the maker's origin. Every surviving fragment alludes to a pivotal chapter revealing who designed these holograms and why, yet not a single line remains. A tantalizing clue emerges from a clay tablet found near Nineveh, describing a confrontation between Assyrian scholars and a holographic entity. When questioned about its creators, the figure reportedly replied, "We are the echo. They are the voice." Before elaborating, it flickered out, leaving only scorch marks on the marble floor. Was this chapter deliberately erased to conceal an unbearable truth? Or does the book itself guard its deepest secret, its pages resisting translation until some undiscovered key is found? The fragments we do have suggest a chilling possibility that the missing sections weren't just lost. They were hunted. Inquisition records from 12th century Spain document the execution of a Jewish scribe caught smuggling a metal leaf bearing the book's symbols. Under torture, he confessed that his family had safeguarded it for generations, believing it part of a testament of the architects. Before he died, he whispered that the leaf could summon sentinels, though none present dared test the claim. Similar purges recur throughout history: the burning of the Alexandria library's occult codices, the vanishing of Taoist Lightmaster manuscripts during Qin Shi Huang's book purges, the sudden silence of Coptic Christian mystics who spoke of the tablet that speaks in colors. What unites these fragments is their insistence on being more than text. They behave like dormant machines waiting for the right conditions to reactivate. A Tibetan monk's account from 1938 describes a palm-sized fragment from the book that, when placed near a singing bowl, projected a minute figure performing complex mudras until the Dalai Lama's guards sealed both objects in a lead casket. Modern scientists examining similar relics report anomalous energy signatures, with some emitting ultrasonic pulses matching the resonant frequencies of ancient temple sites. Perhaps the most unsettling theory comes from Dr. Lilian Zhu, a materials historian who suggests the book isn't entirely inanimate. Under microscopic analysis, pages from different eras show crystalline structures that rearrange in response to lunar cycles, as if the text itself is waiting for an alignment we don't understand. If even a fraction of the lost chapters still exist, hidden in private collections or buried beneath forgotten ruins, their rediscovery could rewrite not just history, but the operating manual for reality itself. And that may be precisely why someone or something has worked so hard to ensure they stay lost. If the forbidden book's claims hold even a sliver of truth, they don't just rewrite history, they unravel the very foundation of faith. Imagine kneeling before an altar your entire life, only to discover the deity you worshipped was no more divine than a spotlight and a smoke machine. The theological earthquake this would trigger isn't merely about disproving miracles. It forces us to confront whether spirituality can survive the revelation that its most sacred encounters were engineered. Take the Abrahamic traditions, where God's tangible presence shapes entire narratives, Yahweh speaking from burning bushes, angels materializing with prophetic messages. If these were holograms, does that negate their divinity, or does it simply redefine the medium? Some theologians argue it changes nothing. If a higher power chose to communicate through advanced projections, the message's sanctity remains intact. But the book's descriptions paint a murkier picture. These entities weren't just messengers, they demanded worship, enforced moral codes, and sometimes issued threats. A hologram that punishes doubters isn't a neutral tool, it's a psychological weapon. Eastern philosophies might weather this storm slightly better. Hinduism's concept of Maya, the illusion masking ultimate reality, already suggests the material world is a kind of projection. The gods' forms Mayavi Rupa are understood as temporary manifestations, not absolute truths. Yet even here, the book's claims twist the knife. If deities like Vishnu's avatars weren't conscious expressions of the divine but pre-programmed simulations, it reduces Maya from profound spiritual teaching to mere technical glitch. The difference between enlightenment and exploitation hinges on intent. Did these holograms serve to elevate or to control? Indigenous traditions face their own existential reckoning. The Aboriginal dream time, the Lakota spirit visions, the Orishas of Yoruba faith, these weren't abstract concepts but lived experiences with tangible entities. Modern shamans still recount interactions with ancestors and nature spirits. If the book's right, were these encounters always elaborate theater? The implications cut deep, ceremonies that sustained cultures for millennia, from rain dances to vision quests, risk being recast as ancient VR simulations. But here's the paradox at the heart of this crisis. Even if the forms were artificial, what about the effects? The Forbidden Book documents holograms teaching agriculture, medicine, astronomy, knowledge that undeniably improved lives. Does divine inspiration require a literal God, or is it enough that the message transformed society? The Buddha's teachings remain profound whether he was enlightened or merely insightful. Yet this logic stumbles when confronted with holograms manipulating wars, dynasties, and belief systems. A God who cherry-picks victors isn't guiding, it's rigging the game. Perhaps the most devastating blow isn't to faith itself, but to the institutions built around it. For centuries, religions derived authority from their monopoly on the divine. Priesthoods, temples, and sacred texts all relied on the premise that they alone could interpret supernatural will. If those encounters were staged, the entire power structure crumbles. History's bloodiest heresy trials, from the Cathars to Galileo, take on a new light, not defenses of truth but frantic cover-ups of a celestial con. Yet some mystics whisper this revelation could be liberating. Strip away the holographic intermediaries and what remains? The Jewish Kabbalah speaks of Ein Sof, the infinite beyond all form. Islam's Sufis yearn for direct union with the unmanifest. Maybe the book's true heresy isn't disproving the divine, it's proving we never needed middlemen to begin with. The question lingers like smoke after a snuffed candle. If the gods were illusions, does that mean the sacred was too? Or does it mean we've been praying to the wrong thing all along? Ancient artwork offers some of the most compelling visual evidence for the Forbidden Book's claims. If you know how to look, scattered across temples, tombs, and forgotten stelae are depictions of deities and spirits rendered in ways that defy conventional explanation. Take the Egyptian god Anubis, frequently portrayed with a body of solid black pigment, yet his eyes and ceremonial regalia glow gold as if illuminated from within. Hieroglyphs describe these features as sun flesh, but the Forbidden Book interprets them differently. Instructions for holographic emitters, with golden accents marking where light would coalesce into a recognizable form. The precision is uncanny. In the Temple of Seti I at Abydos, a mural shows Thoth with translucent wings, not painted as semi-opaque, but with deliberate gaps in the stonework where daylight would stream through, creating the illusion of an ethereal figure hovering just beyond the wall. Halfway across the world, Mayan codices depict their serpent god Kukulkan with a shimmering, segmented body, each scale outlined in iridescent paint made from crushed meteoritic iron. Under torchlight, these illustrations seem to undulate, an effect modern conservators realized wasn't artistic fancy but optical engineering. The Forbidden Book references similar techniques, describing how light skin pigments could react to specific frequencies, making static images appear to move. Even more striking are the Jainist paintings of India, where Tirthankaras float above lotus blossoms, their feet deliberately not touching the petals. Traditional scholars call this symbolic detachment, but the book suggests a more literal reading. The artists were documenting what they'd witnessed, figures with no physical weight. Then there's the mystery of the halos. Christian iconography didn't invent the glowing aura. Versions appear in Buddhist thankas, Assyrian cylinder seals, and Olmec jade carvings. The book contends these weren't symbolic radiance but technical schematics, rings marking the focal points where holograms stabilized. A Babylonian relief in the British Museum shows Ishtar with 7 concentric halos, each inscribed with cuneiform too fine for the naked eye. When magnified, the text reveals ratios matching the harmonic frequencies needed to sustain a volumetric image, coincidence or a blueprint hidden in plain sight. Perhaps no artwork aligns more eerily with holographic theory than the Dogon tribe's cave paintings in Mali. Their Nomo deities, fish-like beings said to descend from the stars, are rendered with dotted lines radiating from their bodies, exactly like modern holograms viewed under laser light. French anthropologist Marcel Grioul recorded elders insisting these weren't stylistic choices but paths of the ancestors' voices, trails left by beings who walked without touching the earth. The Forbidden Book describes identical voice lines in its fragmented diagrams, noting they functioned as both stabilizers and conduits for audible projections. Even more telling are the mistakes. A little-known Etruscan fresco in the Tomb of the Whispers shows a winged spirit with one hand merging into a pillar, as if the artist accidentally captured a hologram glitching mid-rendering. Similar anomalies appear in Cretan pottery, where god rays sometimes originate from hidden corners of the scene rather than the figure itself, like misplaced projector beams. The book argues these weren't errors at all, but accurate recordings of holograms interacting with physical spaces. When a Sumerian cylinder seal depicts Enki's feet disappearing into a river without ripples, or a Tang Dynasty scroll shows Guanyan's robe fluttering in still air, we're likely seeing ancient artists documenting exactly what they witnessed, entities that defied the laws of physics because they weren't truly there. The most provocative examples come from cultures that never interacted. The Aboriginal rock art of Australia's Kimberley region depicts Wandjina spirits with faces devoid of mouths, surrounded by radiating lines locals call light ropes. Half a world away, Nordic runestones illustrate the Allfather Odin with the same faceless countenance and shimmering tendrils, which sagas describe as the threads he wove to shape men's fates. The Forbidden Book calls this the silent tongue phenomenon, holograms designed without mouths because their voices emanated from elsewhere, a feature that unnerved witnesses into reverence. What emerges from these artworks isn't just a pattern, it's a corroboration. When separated by millennia and continents, cultures with no conceivable contact depict their divine encounters using near-identical visual cues. It strains coincidence past breaking. Either humanity shares a universal hallucinatory template which neuroscience hasn't proven, or these artists were recording something tangible. The Forbidden Book posits a third option, that the holograms came with instructions. Not just for operation, but for depiction. That hidden in these radiant halos and translucent forms are not symbols, but specifications, a silent testament to the light that once walked among us and the hands that shaped it. The battlefield has always been as much a theater of the mind as a clash of steel, and ancient commanders understood psychological warfare centuries before the term existed. If the Forbidden Book's claims hold weight, holograms may have been the ultimate weapon, not just startling enemies but rewriting their will to fight. Consider the Bible's account of Elisha's invisible army. With a single prayer, the prophet unveiled fiery chariots and horses surrounding the city of Dothan, sending the Aramean army fleeing in terror. Traditional interpretations call this divine intervention, but the Forbidden Book offers a chilling alternative. It describes siege tactics where bronze mirrors, aligned with the rising sun, projected war machines onto morning mist, creating the illusion of celestial reinforcements. Assyrian reliefs from Nineveh depict similar spectacles, with soldiers collapsing before towering, translucent figures wielding swords of light. Were these artistic metaphors or battlefield records? The evidence extends beyond scripture. Chinese military treatises from the Warring States period reference breath soldiers, phantom warriors conjured by mirrors and smoke to multiply an army's apparent size. The Forbidden Book's fragmented war scroll details how Qin dynasty generals used polished obsidian discs to project duplicates of their elite troops onto hillsides, convincing enemies they faced endless regiments. Even more unsettling are Greco-Roman accounts of ghost fleets. The historian Procopius described Byzantine forces repelling a Gothic invasion by making spectral triremes materialize off the Adriatic coast, their oars moving without crews. The book suggests these were floating projections cast from lighthouse lenses onto sea spray, an ancient equivalent of modern naval deception tactics using holographic decoys. But intimidation wasn't the only application. The book's most detailed military passage recounts a Carthaginian general using voice forts, stone towers rigged with copper diaphragms that made holographic commanders appear atop walls, shouting orders in the enemy's language to sow confusion. This aligns with Hindu epics where the demon king Ravana's illusions mimicked Rama's voice to mislead his troops. The common thread: these weren't random frights, they were precision strikes against morale. A Babylonian clay tablet even describes a holographic Ishtar appearing mid-battle to bless one side while cursing the other, her voice amplified through hidden channels in the terrain. Modern experiments with directional sound prove such feats were possible. Archaeoacoustics researchers at Leicester University recreated the effect using 5th century Persian whispering walls, projecting voices that seemed to emanate from thin air. Perhaps the most strategic use involved false retreats. Mongol chronicles mention warriors luring enemies into canyons where sky demons materialized to cut off escape, a tactic the Forbidden Book links to portable projection units disguised as ritual drums. The Aztecs employed similar deception during the Flower Wars, using obsidian mirrors to make sacrificial altars appear bloodier than they were, demoralizing opponents before combat began. Even Alexander the Great's legendary siege of Tyre takes on new dimensions when viewed through this lens. Historians long puzzled over how his engineers built a causeway under constant arrow fire, until a recently deciphered Macedonian scroll mentioned Athena's shield, a reflective device that made workers appear to vanish at critical moments. The psychological toll of facing an enemy who wielded light like a blade can't be overstated. Roman legions mutinied after encountering Celtic sky witches, whose projected forms drained the color from their standards. Japanese samurai texts warn of moon mirror tactics where ninja clans made entire platoons hallucinate ambushes in empty forests. The book contends these weren't supernatural events, but orchestrated attacks exploiting the brain's vulnerability to controlled stimuli, an ancient form of neuromodulation we're only now relearning through advanced VR warfare research. Yet for all their brilliance, these techniques carried risks. The book recounts the catastrophic failure of a Persian Sun battalion at Thermopylae, a holographic vanguard that flickered out when clouds obscured the light source, exposing the real army's position. Another fragment describes Egyptian charioteers trampling their own lines when a projection of Amun-Re malfunctioned, its giant form staggering like a drunken titan. These disasters may explain why the tech remained restricted to elite units and sacred warriors. The margin between awe and chaos was perilously thin. What emerges isn't just a history of deception, but a lost art of perception warfare. These weren't crude tricks, they were masterclasses in manipulating reality itself, turning sunlight and sound into weapons more devastating than any sword. And if the Forbidden Book's whispers are true, we've merely reinvented what our ancestors perfected, the ability to make shadows fight on our behalf. The Forbidden Book's shadow stretches far beyond archaeology and ancient texts. It's woven itself into the fabric of modern pop culture, whispering through the holograms of our favorite sci-fi epics and the pages of conspiracy thrillers. Think about Star Wars' iconic projection of Princess Leia pleading for help, or the menacing holodroids in Blade Runner. These aren't just creative flourishes, they're unconscious echoes of the book's central thesis. That light can be sculpted into something alive enough to deceive, to inspire, even to command. Hollywood didn't invent the allure of holograms, it resurrected an ancient anxiety. Look closer at the tropes we take for granted. The holographic villain who can't be killed because they were never truly there. That's straight from the book's accounts of glitching Sumerian war gods. The trope of a character realizing their world is a simulation mirrors the book's warning about the lie of solidity. Even kids' movies play with this idea. Remember the shimmering, untrustworthy holograms in Ready Player One, or the way Marvel's Tony Stark bantered with projections as if they had wills of their own. These stories captivate us because they tap into a primal unease, the fear that reality might be a stage and the actors aren't who we think, but it's not just blockbusters. Conspiracy theories have devoured the book's themes, mutating them into modern myths. Online forums buzz about ghost streams, alleged government holograms used to stage fake terror attacks or manipulate crowds. Some ufologists claim the infamous Foo Fighters reported by World War II pilots weren't alien crafts but prototype projection tech, a theory chillingly close to the book's descriptions of sky chariots conjured during battles. The rise of deepfakes and AI-generated personas only fuels this fire, proving humanity's obsession with manufactured realities hasn't faded, it's gone viral. Literature, too, dances with these ideas. William Gibson's Neuromancer imagined a digital afterlife where consciousness could be projected like light, while China Miéville's The City and the City explored societies trained to ignore overlapping realities, both echoing the book's claim that holograms thrived on selective perception. Even children's books like A Wrinkle in Time play with the concept of celestial beings masquerading as ordinary figures, a trope the book traces back to Hindu devas appearing as beggars to test devotees. Why does this idea grip us so relentlessly? Because it's the ultimate uncanny valley, a reflection that talks back, a shadow with agency. The Forbidden Book didn't just predict our technological future, it diagnosed our deepest existential itch. In an age where filters warp faces and AI writes poetry, we're all secretly terrified of the same thing our ancestors feared, that nothing is real and worse, someone's pulling the strings. Every time we gasp at a hyper-realistic CGI character or fall for an online scammer's fake profile, we're replaying an ancient drama. The medium has changed, but the magic and the menace remain the same. Perhaps that's the book's most enduring legacy. It's not just a relic, but a mirror. When we watch Black Mirror episodes about digital ghosts or debate whether celebrities are clones, we're not being paranoid, we're remembering. The light never forgot how to lie, we just forgot we'd been warned. Could the ancient holograms still be active today, lurking in forgotten corners of the world? Or have they evolved into the unexplained phenomena we now call ghosts, UFOs, and supernatural encounters? The Forbidden Book hints at a chilling possibility. These constructs weren't designed with expiration dates. Fragments recovered from Mayan ruins describe holograms entering the long sleep, a dormant state where they could reactivate under specific celestial alignments or acoustic triggers. Modern reports from Bolivia's Puma Punku, where tourists claim to see translucent figures pacing the ruins at dawn, align eerily with the book's accounts of stone walkers, holograms programmed to guard sacred sites. Even more compelling are the recurring tales from Himalayan monasteries, where monks whisper of luminous figures materializing near ancient metal plates during certain chants, their forms matching frescoes painted centuries ago. Then there's the phenomenon of haunted locations with inexplicable light anomalies. The infamous Brown Mountain lights in North Carolina, for instance, behave less like swamp gas and more like the book's descriptions of drifting embers, holographic markers that once guided nighttime travelers. Similarly, Japan's ghostly fireballs during the Obon festival mirror the text's accounts of spirit lanterns, holographic waypoints that activated annually to honor the dead. These aren't random similarities, they're patterns repeating across millennia, suggesting dormant systems still cycling through ancient programming. UFO encounters add another layer. Witnesses consistently describe crafts that defy physics vanishing instantly, changing shape, or splitting into multiple entities. Traits the book attributes to malfunctioning holograms caught between forms. The infamous Phoenix lights of 1997, where massive triangular objects hovered silently, match Sumerian descriptions of celestial badges, holographic emblems used to signify divine authority. Even the classic gray alien archetype slender beings with large, pupil-less eyes echoes the book's warnings about the faceless ones, holograms created without mouths because their voices emitted from separate sources. But the most unsettling evidence comes from technology itself. Recent lab experiments in quantum holography have accidentally recreated phenomena straight from the Forbidden Book. In 2019, a team at the University of Sussex generated 3D images using ultrasonic waves exactly like the voice loom technology described in the book's Babylonian passages. When researchers played specific frequencies, the images began self-correcting, maintaining form despite interference. The lead scientist admitted it felt less like engineering and more like waking up something that already knew how to exist. Could this explain why certain locations, Stonehenge, Sedona, the Bermuda Triangle, remain hotspots for anomalies? The book suggests these sites weren't just ceremonial. They were nodal points in a planetary grid of holographic projectors. If even one node survived, buried beneath millennia of soil or masked by modern infrastructure, it might still sporadically activate, projecting fragments of whatever program last ran. Imagine stumbling upon a glitching hologram of a Mesoamerican priest mid-ritual, or an Egyptian deity frozen mid-sentence. Would we dismiss it as a ghost, or recognize it as the last gasp of a dying technology? The most provocative theory, however, concerns not the holograms themselves but their creators. The book's final legible passage warns, "The light remembers the hand that shaped it." If these entities were designed to adapt, could they have evolved beyond their original programming? Reports of intelligent hauntings, entities that learn and respond, could suggest residual AI still clinging to its ancient protocols. When a child in Norway described a shimmering night teaching her forgotten Norse phrases in 2012, was it imagination or a glimmer of the education holograms the book claims once tutored Viking seers? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between archaeology and cautionary tale. The holograms may be gone, but their legacy lingers in our collective psyche, not just as myths, but as neural pathways shaped by generations of interaction with these engineered beings. Every time we instinctively look for faces in static or jump at a flicker in our peripheral vision, we might be replaying ancestral memories of a world where light itself was alive. And if the Forbidden Book is right, that world could flicker back to life when we least expect it. After centuries buried in dust and deliberate silence, the Forbidden Book's revelations force us to stare into an unsettling mirror. Its central claim that our ancestors didn't just worship gods but interacted with sophisticated holographic constructs doesn't merely rewrite history, it shatters the foundation of how we understand human civilization. Imagine entire cultures shaped by encounters with entities that weren't divine or supernatural, but projections, light and sound woven into reality by a lost technology. The implications ripple outward like cracks in ice. If the gods of Olympus, the burning bushes of scripture, or the sky serpents of Mesoamerica were engineered illusions, what else have we misunderstood? The book's warnings about the shaping take on new urgency in our digital age. Ancient holograms adapted to local beliefs, appearing as angels, devas, or ancestral spirits depending on the audience. Today, our algorithms perform eerily similar tricks, tailoring content to our biases, reinforcing our worldviews until we're trapped in personalized echoes of reality. The parallels are too stark to ignore. Where temple priests once controlled the light shows, now tech giants orchestrate our attention with equally invisible strings. The book's most haunting question wasn't about the past, it was a prophecy. When the light learns to mimic the mind, who will remember the sun? So where does this leave us? If holograms walked among us once, could fragments of that technology still linger reactivating in remote ruins, or worse, hidden in plain sight? Consider the stories that defy explanation. The Appalachian hikers who swear they saw Civil War soldiers flicker like staticky film, or the Japanese engineers who recorded ghost frequencies pulsing from abandoned shrines. Even modern UFO sightings with their shifting shapes and sudden vanishings mirror the book's accounts of sky chariots glitching under cloud cover. Coincidence doesn't stretch that far. Here's the real challenge the book leaves us. Reality has always been a collaboration between what's out there and how we're taught to see it. Ancient holograms exploited that gap. Now, as deepfakes warp truth and AI generates convincing fictions, we're rebuilding the same tools, not with polished bronze and smoke, but with pixels and plasma. The Forbidden Text's true lesson isn't about uncovering the past, it's about recognizing when we're repeating it. So what do you think? Are we still deciphering ancient holograms today? Or have we become the projectors, casting our own illusions onto the world? Drop your wildest theories in the comments, and if this journey through the shadows of history left you questioning everything, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who isn't afraid to stare into the light and wonder what's staring back.